Many participants online since we're in a digital age, so trying to figure out how we're going to be streaming. But we're ready to start. So welcome on behalf of myself and the Ethiopian American Council and Stanford University and our sponsors. Thank you for your support. And you're present at this history-making event. My name is Abdullah Hailu. I'm an old-timer San Jose resident, and by day, I'm a material scientist, I'm an engineer, but at all other times, I'm an advocate for human rights of all oppressed people across the planet. Maybe even while I'm sleeping, sometimes I really don't sleep well, especially when I consider the troubles of Ethiopian brothers and sisters back home. Some of you may not have heard of the Ethiopian American Council, or EAC. Along with my colleagues in the council, are very proud of the hard work and success of the organizations. Since the EAC was founded, the essence of our mission and goals are echoed in the words of Margaret Mead. Mead was not only the innovative cultural anthropologist, she was also an outspoken activist as well as a pioneer in the feminist movement in America. As you know, today there is a huge movement going on in Washington, D.C. So her work's been extended to today. So she once said, "Never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed people can change the world. Indeed, it is the only thing that ever has." From those words, the EAC drives the spirit of its existence. Those words can also inspire today's gathering. EAC was established in 2002, and one of our first goals was to focus on voter registration because that's how democracy works. We wanted every eligible Ethiopian American to register, not only to increase the influence on the local politics, but also to influence our federal government and how it deals with the government in Ethiopia. So we're a grassroots organization. We're trying to, on our ability to influence the U.S. policy if we can. So somehow we have to start somewhere. So we think Ethiopian American Council is a stepping stone or a building block for our community. As proof of our impact on local activities, we can point to those examples. So for instance, we successfully pursued the San Jose City Council to allow us to raise the Ethiopian heritage flag over City Hall for the last 12 consecutive years. A source of pride to our local Ethiopian community, as well as a message to the Ethiopians in Africa that we members of the Ethiopian diaspora have not forgotten them. We have endorsed and assisted the successful elections campaigns of a number of politicians, including the San Jose, our own mayor in nearby San Jose, Sam Liccardo. Also in California, I endorsed Congressman Jerry McNary. In Maryland, Montgomery County Executive Ike Leggett. Also in Maryland, Montgomery County Council Member Tom Hocker. And in Minnesota, U.S. Congressman Keith Allison, the first African American and Muslim, got elected from Minnesota, and we were involved heavily on his election in 2006. We have helped craft and have endorsed the national legislation in the form of congressional resolution. Though those legislative pieces do not have the force of law, they are very important when it comes to raising issues regarding Ethiopia before the lawmakers and citizens of our federal government. This includes House Resolution 935 Free and Fair Election in Ethiopia Act. Unfortunately, that bill did not pass, but did raise important issue before the U.S. Congress in the mid-2000s. House Resolution also 2003 HR 2003 Ethiopian Democracy and Accountability Act, covering issues ranging from independence of judiciary and freedom of the press, the release of political prisoners and economic developments. This resolution passed successfully in the House. However, it was overpowered by the Ethiopian government in the Senate. House Resolution 861, supported in respect for human rights and encouraging inclusive government in Ethiopia. This resolution was introduced last year, and we're waiting for its success. There might be even a follow-up bill from the resolution to the a bill that it's in the pipeline. And now, with the gracious help of many, EAC managed to create this summit to address the mounting problems facing the citizens of Ethiopia in Africa and to assist members of the Ethiopian diaspora, including the Ethiopian Americans, as they seek to help their brothers and sisters on the Horn of Africa. Among others, we must thank national representatives who were extremely helpful with this resolution that are so significant to Ethiopians everywhere. This gentleman includes Mike Honda, the late Congressman Donald Payne, Congressman Chris Smith, Congressman Ed Royce, and the late Tom Lantos. This is the list that others national representatives put other considerable collaboration as well. These individuals really helped our community, especially the human rights in Ethiopia, for the last 2 decades. I mentioned earlier that you are attending a history-making event. Why is this Ethiopia in Crisis Summit a historic-making event? We have 3 reasons. One, from regions around the planet, we have a simple and impressive array of renewed scholars, human rights advocates, politicians, and media representatives, among others, to consider problems with the human rights in Ethiopia and other regions with similar issues. Second, we are sending a message, most importantly, to the Ethiopian people, as well as a member of the Ethiopian diaspora, member of the Ethiopian American community here in the Silicon Valley, and oppressed liability-loving individuals everywhere, that they have not been forgotten, that they are in our hearts. 3, we're telling the current regime now controlling Ethiopia that the world is watching, and we have no patience with the government that kills, imprisons, and exiles its own citizens because they are seeking a political representation, justice, and basic human rights. At this Ethiopia in Crisis Summit, we are now here at Stanford to be social and political engineers. We are here to plan building a better government and perhaps even to plan a regime destructive to their people. What can the Ethiopian people do? What can the world do when the government exists for itself and the corrupt and greedy individuals within and does not address the needs of the everyday citizen? Any government must be servant of its people, no matter the citizen's economic status, nor birthplace, nor heritage or religion. Despite my dull words and poor delivery, I predict that this summit will be successful collaboration, but success without sponsorship and advice could not happen. Professor Larry Diamond, he'll be coming join us later, and our keynote speaker has contributed his sage advice to ensure success as many other speakers and collaborators. So we thank Professor Larry. We especially must not forget to thank the Stanford University for allowing us to this beautiful venue for our summit. Other Stanford's group have contributed, helped with all the details that must be covered in the event, such as this. These folks are the Black Student Union, the Center for African Studies, the SAS, the Stanford Ethiopian Original Students Association, and the Stanford African Student Association. Last but not least, Bay Area ESAT Support Group have helped greatly for the success of this event. So with that, I hope at the end of this summit, we'll come up with some deliverable, which tomorrow we'll have a breakout session also at the end. So with that, we officially starting our program, and our first session will be Session 1, Ethiopia Land and Agriculture Policy. Some of our speakers already pulled out last night, and one of them actually, Professor Makonnen Freo, he's traveling to South Africa from Harvard, so we're probably not going to hear from him. But we'll be talking about This Land is My Land from Professor Wubene Mulatu. and we have, we're moving one of our speakers from session 2 to session 1. That will be Marlette Johnson. She's the student from Stanford. So this session will be chaired by Dr. Dorasa Getachew. So now I would like to invite Dr. Getachew, Dr. Ubatu, and Marlette. Thank you.
Let me start by thanking our organizers, the Ethiopian American Council, for hosting this conference and for inviting all of us here to speak. But before we switch back to English, I would like to say a few words in three of our languages. እንደምን አደራችሁ? ሰላም ናችሁ ወይ? እግዚአብሔር ይመስገን። አከሞልተን ባያጅርቱ ከመለሁ ዳሃኒኩ ጨምርልኝ። አልችልም ነው አስቤ ነበር። ምንድን ነው በሶማሊ ጋር ምንድን ነው? መሀል ሸክተን ነበን ሶማል። እሺ እንግዲህ በፈረንጅ ማውራት እንጀምራለን። The topic for our panel this morning is on land and agricultural policy in Ethiopia. It's a privilege to have two speakers, a veteran scholar, Professor Mulatu Wubne. Professor Mulatu is a professor of planning at East Carolina University in Greenville, North Carolina. He is an alumni of the Haile Selassie I University, or Addis Ababa University, and Florida State University. He authored two books, Industrial Development in Ethiopia, which was published by the prestigious Syracuse University Press. And he's also a co-author of another book, Ethiopia, Transition and Development in the Horn of Africa. He has published a lot of peer-reviewed journals on journals like Cities, North-East African Studies, Regional Development Dialogue, and the African Development Review. He has worked as a World Bank and IMF consultant in Ethiopia, and he's been a Fulbright scholar at the Addis Ababa University in 2013. So let us welcome him with a round of applause. Professor Mulatu, you have 15 minutes?
No, I was told 30 minutes.
Is it half an hour?
I think I can wire it.
You can wire it in 30 minutes or in 15 minutes?
30 minutes would be probably.
Okay, 30 minutes.
I'm usually wired for 45 minutes because I'm a teacher. Once I get into class, I can go on and on and on. So when I'm giving 15 minutes, it's kind of very difficult for me. But I will try as much as possible to be as brief as I can so that I'll give you the opportunity to be able to ask questions. So my topic, I took the topic, the title, This Land is My Land. I don't know if you have heard the famous American song, This Land is My Land, This Land is Your Land, from California to New York Island. That's where it was. But it's basically to see what has happened to the Ethio-Sudan boundary. This is the boundary that extends from the junction of the Tekeze River in the north and all the way down to the Kenya border, 1,600 kilometers distance. And it's affecting, pretty much covering the entire western part of Ethiopia's boundary. Until very recently, we really have not heard much about it, because it has always been a very peaceful area. There has not been any conflict. There has always been that contention that Ethiopia claimed that this part is my land, and Sudan also complained this part is my land. Yet, in the last couple of years, it has been a big issue. So, I was very much interested in to see, how is it that we do not know much about this area? An area that really covers a significant portion of Ethiopia's boundary, and yet we do not have much material on this. There are no books published, there are no articles published, Ethiopian scholars have not done much work. On the other hand, on the Sudanese side, if you were to look at what has been done, there is a significant amount of work done, even in English. There are 3 PhD dissertations that are written on that border. several Arabic publications. So I was puzzled by this. And when I had the opportunity to go to Addis Ababa for the Fulbright, I always had that interest, but I started looking into it. I tried to talk to some people, I tried to get some documents, I tried to get a lot of material, but I can assure you, it's zero. We cannot get any information from Addis. The reason is because it's viewed as very sensitive. Perhaps the Ministry of Foreign Affairs has a lot of information, but you will not be able to get a lot of information on this. However, I was very lucky in the sense that some people who had documents, particularly documents that were collected from England, because every ambassador or every representative of the various governments that was stationed in Addis Ababa always sent a report to London. The Italian counselor sent a report to Rome. The British counselor sent to London. And it's most of our information on what has happened in those areas is basically from that source. So I'm not going to take too much time because that's the problem with me. I can keep on and on. Let's get into the topic. This is the entire boundary that we're talking about. It's cut off, but it starts all the way from, as I said, the junction of the Keze River north up to south, up to the Kenyan border. So that's the entire area that we're dealing with. Although Ethiopia and Sudan share this common boundary, the boundary has not been really demarcated to the satisfaction of either Ethiopia or Sudan. Both of them have contentions. Ethiopia says this part belongs to me, Ethiopian farmers. Sudan says no, this is not yours. And the question is, why is it that it took so long? Because Sudan became independent in 1956 and started becoming an issue since Sudan became independent. You have to understand that Ethiopia did not have any kind of negotiation or any kind of agreement with Sudan. All agreements were between the colonial powers and the Ethiopian government. So Sudan was not even in the picture. Sudan became independent in 1956. So whatever agreement that you're going to hear about, whatever agreement that you're going to see, is basically a negotiation that took place between the Ethiopian government and the British government and the Italian government, primarily, those three. Sudan, all it did was just inherit that document from its colonial powers, and that's the base for the negotiation. Why was it not a major issue? Because it was not an issue. Ethiopian farmers were able to farm, Sudanese farmers were able to farm, conditions were not that much because there was not a lot of settlement, there was not a lot of development going on. It has never been an issue. The only time that it was an issue was when there were migrants or when there were political refugees going from one side to the other. It was pretty much all clear that the Sudanese government was helping the Eritrean movement, and Ethiopia was also helping the Anania, which is in southern Sudan. So every time the political tension gets strong, they get together, they get either in Khartoum or they get in Addis Ababa or in Asmara, and they negotiate, and when the political climate calms down, then it's forgotten. That's how it went on. In 2007, as you know, EPRDF decided to go ahead and, before I go that, let's first see what was the position of Ethiopia all along in the history. First, the treaties that have pretty much decided the boundary line. There are four major treaties. The 1900 treaty, I'm not going to go into the details. That was a treaty between the Ethiopian government and the Italian government to demarcate the boundary between Eritrea, what's now Eritrea, and Sudan. At that time, the agreement was that the line would extend from a junction of the town of two rivers, actually. I wish you could see the map, but I'll go back instead of going back and forth. I'll explain later on. All the way into Sudan, where Menelik was claiming that this is the western part of my boundary. In any case, between that position and the northern part of what we know as Eritrea to the Marab River, they decided to do that demarcation. That demarcation is way into Sudan. 1901, the British, who pretty much had inherited everything that the Egyptians had taken over, which will be more clear as I get into briefly into the history part, had another treaty with the Italians and the British. They left Ethiopia completely out. And I'll be more specific. The most important treaty that really defined the boundary is the 1902 treaty. This is a treaty that famously known as that Menelik is supposed to have signed. Yes, the treaty was signed. There was a seal. There was a lot of contention. No, he has not signed. The seal has been forged, and so on and so forth. It has been signed. However, it was signed under very, very strange circumstances, and we will look into that. The 1907 is the one that defined the boundary between Sudan and Kenya. That was contentious for almost 7 years, pretty much decided, I think, in 1956 or 57. It was recently, and I think that's not going to be an issue unless something happens in the future. What was Ethiopia's position with regard to the treaties? As I told you earlier, that Ethiopia did not have anything to do with in terms of the treaty between Sudan and Ethiopia. It's the colonial powers. And the Sudanese just inherited whatever the British have given them. So what was the position of the Ethiopian government? The Ethiopian government has always said that I will not recognize the treaty, period. Because the demarcation, which was many of you, I'm sorry I'm throwing all kinds of names on you, and I hope it doesn't confuse you, but the demarcation was done by one of the British generals, Wayne, as you know, not generals, majors, Wayne. The demarcation was done without any participation from the Ethiopian side. The treaty says that once we agreed on this document, then the actual demarcation would be done by a joint group between the Ethiopian government and the British government. However, the actual demarcation was done unilaterally by the British. Yet, the British people are claiming that, not the British, the Sudanese scholars, and some even British scholars of that time, are saying that Menelik has given his permission. Because he said, when he was asked in Addis Ababa, we are getting ready to sign the document, to do the actual demarcation on the ground. Do you have someone that would represent you? And supposedly, Menelik said, no, I don't have anyone who has technical expertise. Therefore, if Wayne goes ahead and demarcates it, that's fine with me. He never said that. I think what he had said was that if he can help my people, that we might be able to work out some deal. And supposedly there's a letter written. I haven't seen it. The letter saying, what the British are saying is that the letter says that this guy can represent me, or in other words, represent Ethiopia. The letter supposedly misinterpreted was that Menelik wrote a letter to his dignitaries and told them, this British guy will show you the boundary, and you just go and watch. So there's a big difference. He's not representing Ethiopia. On the other hand, the British are saying, no, he was representing Ethiopia. Whereas what we know, the letter that Menelik is supposed to have written, it says only that he will show you the boundary. That's the letter he wrote to his own dignitaries. The judge matches the Rasas and all these different places, and just see what he's going to show you. So that's the misinterpretation. So the modification was done by one person. So how is it that Ethiopia is going to be able to accept a treaty or a demarcation that was done just only by one side? And that has been a major issue. Let's talk a little about the treaty itself. The treaty mentions only names. It says that this boundary will extend from, and there are only 4 places it sort of mentioned, at the junctions of Hajar and Satit, which is on really, I would have to go into the map, I'm sorry, it's just talking about this thing from let me take you to this map. This map, if you see on the top, that river, you see Tekeze River, that's the one. The international line is with A, B, C, the dark line that's going up. That's the international line. And then the blue line that you're seeing is Tekeze. That's junction is what I was talking about. That's where it started. And this is the northern section that I'm trying to show you. The conflict that arose as a result of this misunderstanding or the interpretation of the letters or the content or as well as the demarcation are, at least based on my own experience or my own, what I was able to find. Start from the north. This is the international boundary as we know it, this line. This is the Tekeze River that I'm talking about. Walkite is here, some of you know, famous names, of course. Lagade, Salam, the entire boundary area is this one. Tigray, this is Eritrea now. The boundary that Menelik claimed in his letter said that my boundary starts at Tomat. Tomat is way into Sudan. This is the international boundary that we have today. Here is Tomat. He said in a letter that he has written, and I wish I had more time to go systematically through it. I'm going haphazard, up and down. But he said that my boundary starts from, all the way it starts from the Red Sea, this goes to Tomat, and there's Al-Qadarif, Blue Nile, and then he goes into Kenya. The treaty also mentions only these four names. That's it. It's the boundary, it's these places. Now, what is the problem with this boundary? Number one, how are you going to draw a boundary when the distance between Al-Qadarif and Tomat is almost 200 kilometers? The distance between Al-Qadarif and Nile over here is another 200 miles. How can anybody draw a boundary? It's just like drawing a boundary line from here to, let's say, Los Angeles. So the straight line, I would give you a straight line, but how are you going to draw an international boundary where people are clearly going to be separated? You're going to go through this, you're going through that. That is pretty much possible. So what do we do in a situation where you have these kinds of map? By the way, a map was attached to the treaty. In a situation where you have this kind of map that cannot be drawn, what do? You go back to international treaties for examples. There was an international treaty done in 1945 when Italy gave up its colonies. And in that international treaty, what was agreed was that if there is a conflict between what is in the text and what is on the map, which one is binding? It has been already decided. The text would be binding. Okay, let's say, suppose Ethiopia takes that position that says, we will take the text. If we take the text, then you go ahead and try to draw a boundary from here to here. Are you going to go through this? Are you going to go through that? Are you going to break this neighborhood? Are you going to exactly the same problem we run into in the Ethiopian Eritrea border? That is one of the problems that we have. The second problem is, as I said, that this actual demarcation was done by Major Guard, who was the guy who just went on his own. Ethiopian, actually, there are all kinds of funny things that have happened, and I'm skipping a lot of things because I wanted to give you time. This demarcation was done by Major Gwen, but how did he demarcate it? What Gwen did was, actually, he went through the whole area. He went to this area, let's say, where is Matama? Matama is down here. Galabat. When he got to Galabat, he went and asked some of the people, and I said, have the Ethiopians been around here? They said, yeah, they were here about 3-4 years ago, but we haven't seen them for the last 3-4 years. Well, you are into Sudan. Have the Ethiopians been around? That's how he did it. He just asked the local people, and if they told them that they have not been here for the last 3-4 years, they are into Sudan. Or he decides sometimes puts it into Ethiopia. And he has done all that correction. For example, the treaty says we would have from here to here, there's a big area that's in conflict in that kind of situation. Why did he do that? Or why did he get that perception? What he didn't realize that is that what the Ethiopians historically have done is they do not consider, they do not recognize a boundary. Ethiopians consider what is known as a frontier or taraf. Make a big distinction between taraf and wasan. Taraf is where you can go, collect your taxes, and because this area is highly infested by malaria, you go back into the highlands. So for the next 3-4 years, there may not be any Ethiopian representation. And that is how always the case, because when U.S. negotiation minute was mentioning that my flag was waving at Tomar, indeed, there was a flag at Tomar. My flag was waving at Gaddafi. There was a flag, Ethiopian flag, posted on Gaddafi. There were a number of towns that are mentioned further down, further south, where Ethiopian flags were posted, but they were never represented there. Well, they can't stay and hang around and establish towns like they have done in the south and start forming cities, forming some kind of government establishment, because it was almost impossible. It's malaria infested. In about 2 or 3 years, they'll be killed. So what they do is they collect their tribute, they go back to the highlands. So when Wayne was doing the demarcation, that's what he did not realize, that the fact that they were not here for 3 years does not mean that they were not claimed. However, what has happened is that if you talk to the local people over here, they will tell you where their boundary is. Their boundary, for example, this is the boundary area, is that Guang River is our boundary. This is Guang, as I said, to give you a position. The Tama is here. At least I'm mentioning these names because you are hearing about them in the news. So they say their boundary is here, follows this river, and this is contentious area where a lot of development is going on. They wanted to go all the way down up here. And so this is two interpretations of a boundary, even by local people versus the Ethiopian government. The Ethiopian government says, at least even if we are going to accept Wales, this would be the line. Whereas local people are saying, this is our boundary. And in this part of particularly the country, it's not a question of no representation. There was Araf Tabaki people who are known as Araf Tabaki. There were 160 people, prominent people, organized, who are supposed to keep track of the security in that area on a rotation base. These people never move from that area. They take a rotation, they go around and make sure security is maintained. If there is any conflict, they go and deal with the conflict. They do not go, even at the time of crisis, we know when the national crisis is called that they have to go on a zamecha, they don't go on those things. Their responsibility is to keep track of that. Okay, I'm getting signals. So basically that's the type of situation that we have as far as that boundary is concerned. The second half of the boundary, I just wanted to show you. There is a match in the second half of the country, and that's because the boundary follows rivers. So that's, in the north is the worst part. Further south, I would have liked to discuss this particular map, because this map shows you some of the treaties I had earlier mentioned, the 1900, the 1901, the various treaty maps. And one particular thing I'd like to show you, for example, is that recently you might have heard that the Ethiopian government has said that, no, this is Abu Gambal, I'm sorry. What I'm seeing there is different from. Okay. How do the local people claim? As I said earlier, Guang River is our boundary. And that claim is not just recent. It has a very long history. Jadmach Kemfu, this is before Theodros, who has claimed that area. Theodros has fought in that particular area at the Barki. Johannes died Matamba, pretty much following that. So it's not something that is new when these local people are claiming. It has been there historically. They also have common saying, the Amharic, when you want to get, if you do not have a recorded history, or if you do not have any documents to go by, you go by local sayings. What do the local people say? And this is one of the, it was collected from different things. One of which is, anyway, part of it is famous that you have heard it in the song. I think that famous song by, I forgot his name, but some of you know him. But this is what they say. Angara, Takazi, Guangano, Wanzati. These are the rivers. Angara, Takazi, Guang, the three major rivers, they are our boundary. And the problem with that area is not a question of only land, it's a question of water. If you push Ethiopian farmers further in, where the heck are they going to get the water? Because this development is along this line, along these rivers. And this area, by the way, in terms of political economic significance, the Humara area alone produces, to give you an idea, 53% of the sesame is salit? Yeah. Sesame, 53% of the national salit is produced in this area and exported. So it's quite a serious area. Okay, what is the solution for this? Should Ethiopia push forward into getting entanglement with Sudan to resolve this problem? And I'll just give you my opinion. I also give you the opinion, I think in my opinion, is a very good outlet for resolution of this situation. I think Ethiopia and Sudan have always been brothers and sisters. They should never get into this entanglement. They should be able to resolve it on bilateral basis. The reason is that Ethiopians have had, in many cases, were given shelter when they went to Sudan, and Sudanese have been given shelter when they came to Ethiopia. They should be able to move back and forth. So, what would be the solution? Let's follow what is known as the African Union Border Program. Let me just say briefly, what is the African Union Border Program? As you know, when the African Union Charter was signed, it was already agreed that they would accept the colonial boundary because they realized that if they touch up the colonial boundary, everything would be messed up. And yet, after accepting that, they found that it was almost impossible. Over 50% of African countries have border problems. When you come to the Horn of Africa, 100% of all the countries have border problems. So, in 2007, the heads of states of African countries got together and they decided and said, what are we going to do? We thought we would be able to resolve this matter by accepting the colonial boundary. What is the solution for us? The solution that they came up was that we should do these things bilaterally rather than trying to get into conflict. First, we should recognize that a boundary is a bridge. It is not a wall. It's a bridge that connects communities. So our perception, our philosophy, our ideology about boundaries should, first of all, change. We have to look at boundaries as I said, bridge. I think there will be a lot of bridges that could be built between Ethiopia and Sudan. That ideology has to be there. Second, any deal or any kind of agreement has to take into account the interest of the local people. This idea of making a decision sitting in Addis Ababa or sitting in Khartoum is not going to be the solution. The local people have to be involved. How are you going to be impacted positively or negatively by this issue, by the problem? That has to be factored. And that's exactly what the OAU is suggesting. Take into account the interest of the two groups. Third, keep building infrastructure between the two. Connect roads. Connect markets. For example, the roads are between Matamba and Sudan. There are roads that are being built on the Asosa side, which Kurmuk. There is a lot of road that are being constructed. And if we keep on building these things, then that infrastructure connection would be. So the OAU, the African Union Border Program, what it's suggesting is that do these kinds of things before you get into a boundary. Because once you have this infrastructure connection, once you have this tie between the two countries, then the whole issue of a border will be secondary. Then you can bilaterally sit on a table and deal with in terms of how you're going to run the border or how you're going to demarcate the border. So my interest out of this is pretty much not only, I think, what is going to happen between Ethiopia and Sudan using the African Union suggestion of the African Union border program is going to be a lesson not just for Ethiopia, for a number of African countries. Take East Africa, Eritrea has a problem, Ethiopia has a problem, Somalia has a problem, Djibouti has a problem, Kenya has a problem, Sudan has a problem, Egypt has a problem. Everybody has a border problem. You will not find any country in that part of the world that does not have border problems. So if this model works for Ethiopia, then that's a very good lesson that could be used for other countries in Africa. And that was really the major thesis that pushed me to get into this research. There are lots of questions that still are not answered. Why Menelik changed his position, why the Ethiopian government changed its position. I wouldn't be able to get into those kinds of things because there are all kinds of confusions that are going on. And I know sometimes it's very difficult to present a coherent presentation on this, but I think that gives you an idea of what we started out with. And I hope I haven't confused everybody, but hopefully that has given you some ideas of what is going on. Thank you.
Thank you so much.